What excuses are you making? And do you even know they're excuses?
Are you calling an excuse an explanation? Ooh. Oh, we're going to go deep dive on this stuff. Welcome. I'm not making an excuse for the fact that I'm crazy about Linda Ray.
I'm not making an excuse that you didn't want to do this because you wanted to go get an egg sandwich.
I tried to excuse myself to hop in the car, head down the hill to our local marketplace here in the country and get myself an egg sandwich. Because I'm hungry. This is me explaining my excusing myself.
Yes. Well, the last few weeks we've touched on not truly strategies and tactics, but more mindset and motivation. Things that get in people's way, like wasted worry and obsessing about things we can't control. And this week we're going to be talking about making excuses and explaining said excuses that keep you stagnant and keep you in the status quo.
Are you confusing explanations and excuses for results?
Yeah.
Linda Ray and I'm Trevor. And Lynn, why don't we start with the word results first and then lead backwards into excuses and explanations?
Well, to get results and feel a sense of accomplishment, you have to execute on certain tasks and generate energy and flow to be productive and thus being profitable. And I think the thing is that if something isn't happening, that there's a reason it's not happening, but is the reason an excuse? Or is the reason truly you taking ownership of you not doing something?
How about this? Is the reason for failing to achieve the desired result an excuse or is it an examination?
Ooh,
So
I like this.
As we're talking about results, what pops into my mind is an assembly line. In a factory that manufactures cars.
Okay.
So at the very front of the assembly line is the whole design process and designing the car, and then all the pieces along the assembly line that get put onto the chassis and the engine and the frame and the body and all that stuff. And then at the end result is as the finished product rolls out the factory door. That's the result. Now, somewhere along the assembly line, there could be problems that come up with a machine that fails, or maybe there's a team working on a certain component and they can't quite coordinate. And what management does is examines every phase of the assembly line to maximize efficiency.
Right.
As opposed to, hey, how come that car came out with one quarter panel in purple and the rest of the car is yellow? Oh, well, Henry down in the spray painting booth was having a bad day. He's going through a divorce, and then, he got arrested for DWI, and then this happened and that happened. Wow, that sounds like excuse making.
Yeah.
Well, that is excuse making, actually.
It is.
That's not an examination. Are you making excuses as to why you're not getting results?
Well, I think I'm going to jump in on this. Now, the examination could have been that management didn't train them on the color codes of mixing the paint they didn't have any proper training.
Bingo.
And then thus they put too much yellow instead of too much blue for the purple versus, whatever. That's a training element. That's a management operations level of examination.
Yeah, so it turns out that when the manager hears this crazy story about Henry going through a divorce and getting DWI, the manager's like, wait, what? And he goes back and he examines what happened, and it turns out Henry's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with Henry. Henry's a good performing worker. Henry wasn't trained properly by his line manager on how to mix the paint. That's an examination. The other story was an excuse.
Let's just talk about excuses because they're so easy to make and they're so easy to rely on to get out of a responsibility. And I think where things fail in the human condition is people accept the excuses because there's other people around that are affected by something that's not happening in the process of a small business. So maybe you have somebody who is ill-suited for a position or just not up to par in executing. The thing is, then you have to examine and decide, do you move that person out of that role?
Or do you provide better quality training to Henry on mixing the paints?
Exactly. But it's all about the self-reflection. It's all about the awareness. Once you take responsibility.
Oh, yeah. Well, now we're getting into an area with another E word that pops into my head when we're talking about excuses.
Ego?
Nope.
Oh.
Emotion.
Oh, yeah.
If you think about it, when an employee, when a manager, when a business owner is questioned, as to a failure to achieve a
Yes.
result.
Oh boy.
And the excuse, blah, 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 blah.
I'm
Isn't
so
that
busy.
really an emotional
I'm
reaction?
so busy.
I'm
That's
so
an
busy.
that's
That's
an
an excuse.
I used to work with somebody who once challenged with like, why isn't this happening?
And it's emotional.
Yes.
Because that person feels that I'm being judged as
Yes.
a person, and therefore I'm going to take it personally, and I'm having an emotional reaction to it because of self-esteem issues or whatever. Whereas
Too exhausting.
the examination
It's another E word,
is
exhausting.
really a word about logic and not emotion. Because in the example we used with the purple fender and Henry in the paint booth, the emotional response from the manager was to make up a fake story just to get his boss off his back, when in fact the examination produced a logical explanation, which was failure to properly train Henry. I have my wealth and hellness suggestion for you all, and it's going to require some deep dive reflection. And it also requires an empty jar.
Oh boy, here we go. I know this.
This goes back to the old curse word jar,
Yeah.
right? Every time you curse, you have to put a penny in the jar or something like
Yeah.
that. You're going to do the same thing every time you make an excuse.
But how do people know if it's an excuse?
You've got to catch yourself. If you're listening to our show and you
That's
really
the
want to
self-reflection.
improve on your business and achieve results that make you profitable and results that make your experience in your running your business more pleasurable, you'll do this self-examination exercise.
Let me give an example. I want to give an example of a real life situation that goes back to 2016. You're going to remember this. I lived in a condo.
You would hope I would remember.
Well,
I'm kind of
you were,
old.
You were around. So 2016, I live in this beautiful condo. I had been living there for 8 years, and some crazy chick moved in above. She was out of her mind, like legit loco. And the soundproofing was such where
There was no soundproofing.
There was no soundproofing. So the dog, she was up in all hours of the night, doing all kinds of things we can't get into because of YouTube guidelines. So now I'm like, all right, I got to get out of here. There was no reasoning with the board, nothing, right? So I say to Trevor, I'm selling this thing. We're going to get out of here. And I was really upset because I was not planning on moving. So I was mired.
You built a very happy, wonderful,
bubble,
comfortable
yeah.
home for yourself there. You
Right.
had a very comfortable existence.
And within
and this person came in and completely upended your comfort.
Yes, and within a month of her moving in is when I realized I'm going to have to decide how to control what I can control. Within 6 months, I had listed the condo, and it just continued to get worse, and she turned the whole board against me. It was pretty bad. And so then I'm in my office one day, and I said, wait a minute, I can afford to get an apartment while this thing is listed.
For sale, yeah.
While it was listed for sale, I'm going to look for apartments nearby and move, even though it's not yet sold, but knowing it was going to be sold eventually. And as soon as I made a decision on problem solving and finding a solution, I could feel my emotions change. It was a visceral experience.
And up until that point, I don't want to say you made excuses, but in a way you kind of did.
Well, it
because
was...
You're going through, well, why hasn't it worked out at the board? And there would be all these reasons. Well, she bought brownies for the board. She's trying to turn the board against me, blah, blah. These sounds all like excuses. But then when you did the emotional self-examination...
Yeah, I was like, well, what am I
And you did a
gonna...
little math, too. Hashtag math is fun, one of my favorite phrases.
Yeah.
You did the math saying, I could afford to get another apartment while my condo's
For so
on
many
the market.
months, right.
And then you felt your emotions change.
Yes, because I controlled the situation. I searched for a solution, which is just psychologically with your brain. There is a stimulation that happens scientifically when you start to problem solve. So I know you're moving me along here.
I am trying to move
You're
you along.
miming-
Definitely moving you along.
Miming and moving.
What Linda's not telling you is almost immediately Linda made that decision, she had a buyer for the condo.
Well, there's that redirecting of the focus to control
Out of
what
nowhere.
you control. So,
It kind of goes to our last podcast about obsession. Linda stopped obsessing about how this crazy person had driven her out of her beautiful home and started focusing on things she could control.
Yeah.
It seems like the emotional energy went out to the universe and it brought a buyer.
Well,
towards
that's
you.
whoever said energy flows where attention goes. I think that's from The Secret, from way back, Esther Hicks.
Linda
and
has all
that.
these really awesome self-improvement quotes. I have quotes from like The Hobbit.
Which is, give me one.
My precious.
That's not a quote. That's
a quote.
creepy sounding.
I'm Trevor, and this is Linda Ray. We ain't making any excuses about hanging out with you all today, but, get that jar ready, and for the next 5 days or 2 weeks or something, throw a piece of paper in there, or a dollar bill or a penny or a dime or something every time you make an excuse. Boy, I promise you will change radically how you conduct your business.
Unless you just like being stuck in the status quo, then, this is not the podcast for you.
Definitely not. This is Simple Sense for Small Business.
Mistakes we've made so you don't have to.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and we'll see you next time around.
Ciao.